Hey everybody, I'm Tiffany Weber and I am a North Carolina real estate attorney. And today we're going to talk about what has to happen before the seller gets paid and the buyer gets the keys. The first thing that has to happen is that all of the required documents have to be signed by all parties. So in the seller's case, that's the deed, the lien waiver, any of those other documents required under the North Carolina standard offer to purchase, plus any additional documents agreed to between buyer and seller. And then in the buyer's case, that's all of the loan documents or any acquisition documents that need to be signed in order for the lender to actually fund the loan and send the money to the closing attorney's office. Some lenders require being able to see the signed documents before they'll send any money. Not every lender requires this. Some will send the funds before the documents have been fully signed, but regardless, all of the documents have to be signed. Now, if your lender requires seeing the documents before funding approval, that means there is zero chance that your loan is going to, or that your deed is going to record the second you walk out of the closing room, because then the documents have to be sent over to the lender. They have to review them, approve them, and then say, sure, now we will send the money that we need to send. And wires are not instantaneous. So they're certainly quick and efficient, but they're not instant. Speaking of wires, all of the funds needed to complete the purchase have to be accounted for in the attorney's trust account. So that means the buyer's cash to close, the lender's funds, and sometimes even sellers have to bring money to closing. For example, if the sale price does not cover their closing costs and their mortgage, then they have to bring money to be able to pay off the whatever is outstanding. So the seller's funds would also have to be accounted for in our trust account before we could close. That's a very rare scenario, so most often we're just waiting on buyer's money and the lender's money. Once those funds have been accounted for, then we can move on. Now, once we have those things, then we have to perform a title update. So once you go under contract, a title search is completed just to determine whether there are any title issues outstanding that need to be remedied before closing. Now, the time that the title search gets completed and the time to closing, those tend to lag a little bit. So we have to perform essentially a mini title search. It's still the same scope, it's just a much shorter time period. So let's say you sent in the contract to our office 2 weeks ago, we do the title search, now you're closing. We have to search that 2-week time period to make sure that the seller has not done anything that would impair clear title. And if that has happened, then that needs to be remedied. Now you may be wondering, well, why don't you do it earlier? Well, we need to have this process completed as near in time to recording as possible. So it needs to be essentially the very last thing we do, because if we said, okay, we finished the title work a week ago, it's been a week, you're going to close in a week, we'll just do it right in the middle. Well, there's still a whole week that things could have been filed or indexed that we wouldn't know about that could cause title impairments. So that process has to be done as close in time to recording as possible. And it's kind of a non-negotiable. So since it has to be done after all of the documents are signed and right before the deed recording, that means that it's not going to be instantaneous that your deed gets recorded. Now, if the title update reveals no issues, all the documents have been signed, we've got all the money, then your documents get recorded at your county's register of deeds. Now, how that gets done depends on whether the documents have been taken in person or if they've been submitted electronically. A lot of people think that e-recording is instant, just like they think wires are instant, but that is not true. Most counties have a system where you submit the documents and they get in line, just like if you were standing there in person. So with the rise of the use of e-recording, that means there's a lot more documents in line. So that means that if it's submitted for e-recording, we're just at the mercy of how quickly the counties can process it. So a lot of times we'll send a courier in person who does a title update, makes sure there are no issues, and just walks right to the counter, gets the documents recorded, and then that moves us on to what everybody really cares about, getting the keys and getting paid. Occasionally, we'll have sellers tell us, I'm not giving the buyer the keys until I have the money in my bank account. Well, unfortunately, those two things are not dependent upon each other. The buyer is entitled to possession of the property once the deed records. And guess what? Seller cannot get paid until after the deed records. Once the deed records, we're permitted to send the funds, whether by wire or check, to the seller, whichever one they have chosen. But a wire, again, like I've said probably 8 times already, is not instantaneous. It has a lot to do with how quickly your bank processes or batches their wires. So you can't, as a seller, withhold the keys from the buyer until you see the money in your bank account. So again, buyer is entitled to possession upon the deed recording, and then upon the deed recording, we are permitted to send the seller their funds. So there you have it. That's everything that has to happen from the time when you sign at the closing to once you either get your funds or get the keys. Hopefully that answered your questions about this process, and we'll see you in the next video.